Hello, I am Poik, and I am here to bring you an idea I've had for a very long time. It's difficult for me to do it justice because I'm not a linguist. I don't know any linguists who would even have time for me right now, and I'm kind of chronically ill, but don't mind that. Also, feel free to rip into this idea. I'm always open to constructive criticism. So, I had this idea after seeing the first Conlang Circus, which I finally caught the day after submissions were due for the second. During the third Cursed Conlang Circus, I was recovering from being laid off and trying to get a diagnosis for the thing that caused that, but I could not ignore Cursed Conlang Circus 4. Themes of non-human phonetics and evolved language intrigue me. I spend more time than I should looking at how language evolves, historical context for etymology, and stuff along those lines. I know, historical usage of language does not dictate present usage. How people understand each other does dictate present usage, but the themes are still inspiration to the backstory of my work. More on that later. For now, let me introduce to you my submission for the Cursed Conlang Circus 4. Meow'm. It is what could arise from close proximity between cats and humans for many millennia, as cat brains begin to develop language centers. If you let me take me on this journey, I'll explain to you the universe and this may be a possibility, and how utterly awful the language is. So, what is Meow'm? After many years of close contact, cats finally got the ability to get their point across. Tell us they really want food right now. I mean, we can already tell that's pretty much all they ever say. Anyone who owns a cat knows that. But cats hate being misunderstood, and they think they are. Eventually, they got to the ability to have two-way communication with humans with some success, at least. But because of the limitations of cat vocalization of the cat neocortex, their language is still developing. It's only got so much syntax it can work with, and the cats aren't capable of developing more at this time. They are slowly, mentally evolving, learning, teaching how to be understood. And that's kind of where the cursedness comes with. How? How does it come in? Well, seriously, how long have you lived with cats? They're lovable little hellions, but they are absolutely cursed. Cats are very self-centered. As such, the syntactic ability to reason about other creatures developed differently. As cats only really think about themselves, the linguistic structure for the functional second or third person usage is based upon subjunctive mood and primitive evidentials, kind of, not a linguist, to indicate the intent of the sentence. For simplicity, the most common things for a cat to speak about are implied. For instance, the full sentence means roughly, pay attention to me. It is literally just for or to me. The rest is implied. There aren't formal rules for a lot of these implications. Cats just expect you to know it, but I can walk you through what has been established in what we've learned by dissecting the language as it develops. To get further into it, the name of the language itself uses these implications for a partial literal translation of food for me. The I is a given, and here the verb is, as usual, implied to be want. But cultural implications apply here. The language name implies that the cats were only in it for the food the whole time, and could use it to beg explicitly for treats. This is also why the most common vocalizations for cats revolve around food and toys. I am not a linguist, so I can only get so cursed. Maybe one day I'll know enough to make a better version of this, or a different approach to being cursed. Now, you may be thinking, cute, but why do we care? Well, it's been shown that despite everything the cats do to make our lives more annoying, cats do lead to healthier lives. And, well, clearly there is interest in this. There have been other works in the Conlang community to bridge the gap. there are conlangs such as Mao, Phonology, and Catlang, and I will have links to what I could find of them in the description of this video if you're interested in learning more. They're widely inspirational, but I came about this in a much different way. This is the first evidence of vocalized bidirectional speech with another species. Dogs, despite being domesticated for a much longer time, dogs actually have fewer neurons and fewer synaptic connections than cats, and mostly communicate via body language with humans. This is a purely vocalized language because cats realized humans are really bad at determining other species' body language. But seriously, why cats? No reason. So there's going to be a running thing in these, that these are just the human approximates to the sounds that cats make. In such, these aren't going to be a direct correlation to how cats themselves speak this language. However, this will give us the ability to speak to them. Now, we're going to start with the simple things that we can approximate. I'm going to skip vowels for now because I'm pretty sure I've heard in one caterwaul every single vowel that a human can pronounce. That doesn't necessarily mean they can differentiate between each of the vowels. Generally, only a few of them are going to be used in the language for now. But we should actually pick the consonants that they can pronounce for use in this language. The first, most obvious, is the ones that are used in the word meow or nya, depending on which culture you're in, that you are going to interpret the sound as something different. But in general, the first sound is a nasal consonant. So it's interpreted as different nasal consonants throughout the world, but I'm going to go with M just to cover all of them. It's not important which nasal consonant you use. You can but generally the cat pronounces this with the mouth completely closed, which I interpret as being closest to the bilabial nasal consonant M. But generally it's going to be understood no matter which one you use, because nasals are similar. Not exactly the same. Not important right now. Because they're not distinct enough for all cultures to agree on which nasal consonant the cat is using, I think that's appropriate. Then there's another consonant in meow, actually. This consonant is y, palatal approximate y. There's a third consonant because the W in meow is actually pronounced oo, which is a vowel. So there is another common noise that cats make that you've probably heard before. People refer to as a trill or a chirp most often, but it is brr or prr, which has two consonants generally that haven't been established before. The trill, which has been interpreted as a uvular trill in a lot of literature, but to me sounds more like the alveolar trill, which they actually pronounce with their mouth completely closed, which is not something I think humans can do. Prove me wrong. I want to hear it. Well, in Mildred Moelk's, forgive me if I mispronounced that, Vocalizing in the House Cat, a phonetic and functional study, it suggested that this is more of a MHRM noise, but confirms that it is only pronounced with a completely closed mouth, despite using sounds that humans can only make with an open mouth, the nur sounds that they suggest. This does lead us to reinforce the idea that this is only going to be the human part of how to pronounce this language, and it's not going to be the same. So to that, and back to the trill itself, although it's been interpreted as an uvular trill in literature, I don't think it matters how the human pronounces it, as long as it sounds like a trill. It'll be understood in communication of this language. Now, the next sound that we have general evidence for would be the hiss sound, which I've seen referred to as the uvular fricative. I think I'm pronouncing that correct. By the cat here, I could verify by them being scared at me using it. The hiss noise is generally only used in anger, so it's basically only going to show up in words for similar reasons. I'm going to use the uvular fricative, although some people will interpret it as just an S noise. I think the uvular fricative is more expressive of the sounds used during hissing, and I have seen cats react to it stronger. Feel free to disagree with my choices. Going off of the sort of East Coast US dialect, I'm not getting into variations such as marar or balto meow. Anyway, I'm going to rapid fire the rest of the common cat noises. A rhotic vowel for the growl sound, I'll use alveolar approximant. From the spit, usually accompanied by hissing, we get a T-like stop. And there's so many noises and chittering that I may have to reevaluate this too many times to actually finish my submission for the Cursed Conlang 4. So how about a glottal stop, also used in chirps, bird calls, and a unvoiced velar plosive, which seems to be used interchangeably with a click I can't quite place, but I've been assuming to be a tenuous palatal click. But seeing as I haven't mastered that, I was probably going to use a tenuous alveolar click. Noticing a distinct bias in my choices. I'll work on that later. I'm actually skipping the clicks and just replacing them with plosives for now, particularly an aspirated velar plosive. Now, I do have video of Big Billy pronouncing a few sounds that are less common than these common cat noises. It's not always agreed on what he's saying here, but it does sound like he's saying, I'm Big Billy, the biggest wet willy, and I will go clearly, which is weird. But this was before a common language between cats and humans is established, so it's just him trying to approximate noises to get his point across. I don't think he even knows what he's saying. In fact, the k noise and clearly kind of sounds more like a G here. But go clearly doesn't really make any sense. So that gives us the lateral approximate. Ooh, I don't know how the cat actually pronounces it, but you hear it a few times in his speech there. And the velar plosive g, which gives us a little bit more to work with in establishing a common phonology. As cats evolve a little more and get more dexterity, there may be more sounds added to this language, but for now, this is its current state. And that brings me to the next point. The language is still evolving. No, this is not just an excuse for me to half finish the language. It is about as finished as Tokipona as it can be used to describe things. It's just hard. And that's partially because cats get really mad if you don't understand them, and it causes them to shut down and refuse to talk to you for a while. So getting them to even establish this much of a language was hard. After all, cats hold grudges for a long time. You have to win back their trust of your ability to understand them, or trying to understand them. They will assume pretty negative responses out of you because they don't have the patience to figure out what you're trying to say if they don't instantaneously understand how you're interacting with them. So this actually goes into cats don't understand cause and effect the way that humans do, and it causes a huge divide on how things are actually communicated. So you can't, like, well, let's not get into cat psychology too much here, but because of that, cats really don't care about the language itself. They only care about getting enough to satisfy their own needs. So they managed to get the ability to say, give me food. And there was a huge stop in the development of the language after that. So it's still an ongoing process. But we do have a basic vocabulary. More of it will be in the description in a Google Sheet. I'm going to display words needed for the translation and for general communication, and explain to you the syntax and all that over the next few slides. So the obvious one, meow, which is used in the language name actually, is the meow word for food. Similarly, mew, which is more commonly spoke by kittens, is referring to toys. And these are used in conjunction for compound ideas in ways that make sense for cats. For instance, meow meow is the act of eating or just eat. Meow meow, the compound word toy food, actually is the cat word for alive. And trying to convince a cat that things aren't food just because they're alive and moving is really frustrating and slow to get the point across. It'll often be responded to with go away, goodbye, there's no distinction, basically just no, I'm not listening anymore, you are done. Now, these are the words that the cats are most likely going to use in conversation because they don't see anything else really important except pet me or pay attention to me. So a lot of other words are loan words or something similar. For instance, the word for snake is bit, which is based off the word serpent, pronounced sort of how a cat would approximate it. It kind of just sounds like his spit, honestly, and that's kind of how they remember it. So yeah, that's snake, and because they don't really make the distinction because it's not food, it's not interesting, it's not a toy, cucumber goes into that list as that is what they mistake it for. Trying to convince them that it's not a snake doesn't quite work. I've tried. Also, they don't really have a word for like different amounts of time in the future. This is why trying to tell a cat that food is coming soon, not right now, is really hard to do because they don't really have any cultural distinction of amounts of time. They just see it as something that hasn't happened yet. That should be obvious to anyone who is trying to convince their cat that it's not food time yet. So the meow word kick refers to anything in the future, anything that hasn't happened, anything that may not happen because it's so far in the future, and of course, futile. It's basically your cat saying Muda, like in JoJo, staring out the window at the birds they can't actually get to, saying it's futile. That's why they're well, that's where it comes from. Them talking about how they're going to capture that bird in the future. This is actually papers on why people think cats chatter. This is my interpretation of how it became part of the language. The actual theoretical psychology behind it is more to the effect of it's being used to try and lure the animals in question, which is why it kind of approximates squirrel chittering, sort of. And it's often accompanied with chirping, which sounds a little bit more like bird call, sort of. Anyway, getting back to the word that I introduced earlier, that is the Meow'm word for majestic, which of course refers to cat-like, or can be just used to refer to a cat if it's used as a noun. I have no defense for this. Cats are extremely self-absorbed. And of course, the most obvious one in the language, which just means I am surprised, or a surprise, or yeah. If it's used as a single declaration, it would be I am surprised, but it can be used as a verb for surprise, transitive or intransitive, or as noun a surprise, and similar words. It's generally going to overlap with horror most as a emotion. But wait, hold up. We have to address the elephant in the room. Earlier I dropped that the language always has the subject as the first person, but just like your language's verbs, this language does have the ability to refer to the second and third person subject, just not, what's the right way to say it? As a grammatical category that can be used in the subject of the sentence. So there's sort of set phrases you can use to make second and third person subjects happen functionally. So there's second and third person. Well, sort of. It's rare to hear cats use these set phrases. Instead, they would reframe the context to themselves. For instance, a cat wouldn't say their owner got stabbed, but they would complain that blood got on the fur from the owner's flesh wound. A cat wouldn't warn you of a murder in the bedroom. They would say they don't want to see your blood on the carpet and expect you to feed them promptly after the confrontation. A cat might use hypotheticals, but it's more likely they just ignore things that don't concern them, or that they think doesn't concern them. These grammatical helpers are mostly workarounds for what cats can understand, and are more frequently used from the humans in the conversation. So then, what's the workaround? Well, even in the case of nonverbal entities, it's anthropomorphization. Like Brave the Little Toaster, you know. So, to say the car died, one could say how that affects them literally, or one could say, I could have heard the car say, I died. Yes, this is awkward and unnecessary. Don't shoot me. I'm only the messenger. I originally had planned to have the structure around evidentials, but I'm in over my head basically every turn, so I lean heavily on the languages I only partially know. English, Latin, and so little Japanese that it's not funny. I'm only really fluent in gibberish, sadly. Structurally, this language is simple enough, but that obviously is its biggest problem. Luckily, we can use the subjective mood to fill in some gaps. For this, let's finally introduce the Meow'm word for to be. We'll rapid fire this because I need to get this translation before I miss my bus. The standard flat tone is indicative for statements of fact and generally present tense, as that's all a cat cares about. So, would be I am awake, often just shortened to when you wake up a cat. Then the rising tone is subjunctive, the one we care about, which we unfortunately will be using too much. For instance, the command give me food becomes gib meow. Or, if I were you, I would give me food. Kinda sounds like a threat, no? Notice that only the subject is affected, and all the other aspects are still from the speaker's perspective, hence the give me food. A falling tone is used for things that have already happened. It's past perfect because if the thing had a effect still, the cat would rather talk about that. So, if a toy is lost and the cat is blaming on another, they might say, give me, or I had given the toy to you. Now, this kind of came about from combining the counterfactual nature of subjunctive with the past perfect tense to make a statement indicate something the speaker thinks should have happened in the past. That is, a peaking tone, the rising from subjunctive and the falling from past perfect, kind of got combined to create what I believe is called optative perfect? Anyway, meow meow would be, I should have already eaten. Now, the eagle-eyed and cat-eared among you might have noticed that I've introduced something to the language without really ever explaining it. It doesn't help that there's no writing system, so this is from humans' various recordings of the language. Just like the grave and acute marks have been misused in recordings of tone, these notes aren't from people who use tone in their native languages, so they were not a afterthought, unfortunately. And worse, the caret is misused to indicate peaking. In the notes, the marks go over the parts that are tonal, but I don't know how to do that electronically. Anyway, the apostrophe is actually an audible punctuation that ended up finding more places in the language than it should. It is pronounced ke. That's right, I lied to you. The word for not happened yet is actually spelled apostrophe apostrophe in a bunch of scribblings for some reason, but a normal person will just write it K-E-K-E. This came into the language sort of like chittering is used in conjunction with chirps to imitate someone else. It sections off quotes to not be a part of the main phrase of the sentence, and in some dialects it's used for the conditional parts of subjunctives to indicate more clearly the separation, but it is also used to glue the direct object to other parts of the sentence, hence its use in the language name, to indicate both meow and are attached to the same verb. Yes, this is actively problematic. No, my cats don't care. Oh, the tonals aren't just for verbs. Despite a lot of words being homophones or reduplicate into verbs. More rapid fire. Neutrals tend to continue to be the most common, so direct object here. Falling tone is dative, like in the language name. Rising tone is ablative, and adjectives and modifiers tend to precede the word they're modifying, so genitive form comes before the word owned. No ke here, as is attached to the following word, so not to a word a bit farther away. This is actually a rare form, as cats assume that everything is theirs, so it's not required to specify usually. It's more common to use this to refer to body parts, if anything. Oh boy.
What a majestic serpent! Surely it won't weave itself into the loom of infinity, nor coil into the wheel of endless ruin and rebirth. Oh my god! Its jaws close upon its own flesh, fangs stinging deep into its own tail. It gnaws its bones as if they were the ribs of time itself. It drinks its own marrow as if siphoning eternity. A beast both devourer and devoured, a whisper swallowed by its own echo, slithering tail eater. Truly a testament to the unbroken dirge of time, now and forever curled in my heart and the heart of the world.
Well, this is an interesting passage for a Cursed Conlang Circus concentrating on non-human phonetics. Most of this is just gibberish embellishments. How do I explain the Loom of Infinity to a creature without the cultural reference of the Loom of Fates, or the Morai? Heck, how do I explain infinity to a species which doesn't understand the difference between a minute later and a year later, or a clawful and a flock? So, I made some creative selections with the things that cats would consider synonyms in this rewording. I don't really have time to go over how all of it is restructured, but generally I changed what I could to what the cat would perceive, or how they would interpret the concepts introduced. This definitely sounds like a human-centric mindset, and I doubt a cat would even care about this, but they should understand. Hopefully. Yow brr xb bra xbit gr bra keke ma be ke gr bra mra ke mama har blah mra u nom woo mew meow meow yow woo teet ruru im woo tal her woo ke nom bom gur gur meow meow ke bag bom ke meow meow bom mew meow meow gur gur mum ke. Oh boy. And that is the translation, at least up until Siphoning Eternity. I'm sorry for my sins against language. Honestly, it's not that bad, and don't expect to get very far, but I'm happy to have this actually out of my head and onto paper, sort of. So I'm going to leave a bunch of sources in the description of things that inspired me. Thank you all for joining me on this stupid trip. Don't worry, I take very good care of my little hellions. They're very spoiled. Until I get to see y'all again, take it easy and stay cute. Maybe sometime after the submission deadline I can come back to this and fix things, because there's so much I left out, so much I know how to do better, I just don't have the time to do it. And there's so much I just don't know how to do. I've never done this before. This is my first attempt. Thank you all for joining me.